I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today, my title is Unbecoming is a Lie. There is a very popular Substack with tens of thousands of subscribers, many of them paid, and it's called Lies Are Unbecoming. And that's a very clever title. It has brought in many of us who are on the conspiracy fringes, because what it does is put out 2 or 3 a day of book summaries and essays that are compiling a wealth of information from all of the conspiracy books that we love, and many of which we've never had a chance to read. So this is extremely prolific and brings all of that information together. What is a lie, I believe, is that Unbecoming doesn't say that those are AI summaries, and there's nowhere that it distinguishes with where the AI ends and when the real voice of Unbecoming, if there is one, begins. To me, that is deceptive. I think that we need to be using AI, and I love these summaries. I feel like it's Reader's Digest versions of all of these great books. But what Unbecoming does is borrow that authority, is mirror back all of the best information that's been put out there by real researchers and present it not as his own, but as his own summary. So I'm going to look closer at that. To make my case, I'll be going back 3 years to 2022 when Unbecoming first began on Substack. I'll look at the difference in style and also who he was endorsing then, who we now know to be controlling the opposition. And then I'll look at the similarity in the styles of how those people control the opposition and who he's endorsing these days, who I think is doing the same. But this all came to a head because of his recent interview and his censorship of the comments that were negative, including mine. And this was of Sasha Latypova. So let's start at the beginning. I don't think that Unbecoming's use of AI is even controversial, even though he never admits it. Because the volume that he puts out of reading entire books in one day, putting out that and also another essay, compiling the research from 3 or 4 different sources, that is humanly impossible. But this was validated when Good Citizen ran an AI check on both Lies Are Unbecoming and also Escape Key, another very popular Substacker. And both of those came back 100% as AI. Of course, Good Citizen is another blogger with no voice, no face, and no name. So I think we need to be looking very closely at that anonymity because we need to know who is the person behind this. I don't understand why these men are saying, I can't allow myself to be known because women are walking this tightrope all the time. If we have the courage to show our faces and use our real names, can't men do that too? Doc Malik extended an invitation to both Escape Key and Unbecoming to come on his show and be interviewed. Unbecoming declined in his blog and said that he didn't think that it would help anything for getting the message out to have his face and reputation associated with it, as if he was being very humble. Escape Key did come on and was interviewed, showing only the back of his head. This ended up being a very frenetic and jumbled sort of interview, very different from the coherent writing that he puts out in his blog. This was commented on especially by Frances Leader, who did a scathing review in the comments, and she said, This is obvious because he's AI, and it's AI that's creating all of that smooth and erudite prose, whereas in real life, he doesn't have any of that. Dot Malik has also commented that some people just do better in writing than in interviews, but doesn't make the AI connection. Out of curiosity, I went back to his early work in 2022, and I found the style much more disjointed, sometimes just lists of different points. One of those might be, is Robert Malone really the inventor of mRNA vaccines? And then saying yes and putting a meme of Sesame Street's Big Bird as a trusted expert and Robert Malone as a conspiracy theorist. So that seemed to be an endorsement of Robert Malone, which many people had at the time, including myself. And then I go back to his very first post, which was Letter to My Two Grown Sons, something that he re-put out as an ebook a year later. In looking at that, he says that there were 3 people who really woke him up, and that was Brett Weinstein, doing his interview of Robert Malone, and Steve Kirsch, who he says is one of the greats and someone who he hopes there would be books written about. In all 3 of these, he is endorsing them, even though with Brett Weinstein, he misspells his name and spells it with 2 T's. And he says that there's a mistake, a place that he disagrees, because Brett is really focused on elimination. And that's what they want us to think, is that elimination of the virus is what we need to do, when Unbecoming says that that virus will always be with us, affecting 50% of the planet. That does not seem to be what he came to later, because he's been one of the biggest proponents of no virus, and in a way that's very repetitive, that he brings in the same research again and again and again, and has been really relentless on that point. I think that most of the points that I've heard other people cite have come from the research that he has presented in summaries. These small errors are another tell, I think, for AI. Someone else who I identify as controlling the opposition is Charles Eisenstein, and Unbecoming has done a summary of sacred economics, but he calls him Charles Einstein in the title, even though in the body he uses Eisenstein probably 30 times and does that correctly. I don't even know whether that's someone who is proofreading his own AI production, who then is getting the title wrong and the name of the author. That same technique gets used of mirroring, that's one of the ways in which the opposition gets controlled. And I've definitely identified that with Malone, because Malone has mirrored back some things that he stole from me. And then Eisenstein, of course, has mirrored back stealing my term tonic masculinity, and then has ended up, I find out, stealing things from other people. So all of those points that Unbecoming cites are ones that I now recognize as ones that he stole from other people. I think that this is a pattern where, again, we have the same people getting credibility by reflecting back what it is we already know to be true. And then they get to slip in that other part that is part of that artificial intelligence asset operation. That's what I think this could be. What I'm seeing with other Substackers who I respect is that they are giving Unbecoming credit for the people that he's actually summarizing. So the authors and the thinkers and the original researchers are not really getting that voice. They're not being seen. and there's no arguing with them, because when I disagree with something on Unbecoming's site and I throw that out there, it's like throwing a rock into the void. You never hear an echo. You never even hear it hit bottom. It just goes and disappears, and no one ever engages with that idea. So nothing can be challenged because you're not really dealing with that author. You're dealing with someone who is just reflecting it back. And that's like trying to talk about what your problem is with AI customer service. That it doesn't matter. They are inexhaustible. You can just continue to rant. You can make the best points possible, but you're never going to change their mind because they do not have a mind to change. Unbecoming has an excellent formula for his AI summaries. It starts with a 1-minute elevator pitch. It then goes into a deeper dive and ends with 30 Q&A. These are ones that make it accessible, that bring out the important points and make this seem like a super intelligent, well-informed, well-read person who couldn't possibly be wrong. I personally find AI so seductive that I have to keep it at arm's length. I did my interview of Tori Alexander on Riverside, which is out of Israel, which I did not know until it wasn't getting me the feedback because it was the first night of Hanukkah. But then also it has so many AI tricks. You can edit everything with text. You can end up taking out all the pauses, all of those awkward little repetitions. You can make it where everything that you do is turned into clever little clips. It summarizes every different section. It gives you back titles. It gives you a beautiful summary. And what I found was that I ended up serving it. I had to take what it had written and then try to improve on it. And that was always making me second. I wasn't using my own sense of invention and creativity. Instead, I was reflecting back from it. So I think that there is a way in which being awkward serves us, and we need to hang on to that. There's a bumper sticker that says, "Drum machines have no soul." And even though they may be good for some things, it is nothing like watching Isaac Middle on Down the Wombat Hole do 9-inch nails and put that passion into it. There's no way that you can keep the passion without having some of the imperfections. And that brings me to my final point in knowing that Unbecoming is a lie. His censorship and deletion of every comment that was critical of Sasha Latypova. In mine, he deleted the ones that just linked to the episode that I did on her. He also deleted the one where I quoted her. And that was really all that I put in there, was in response to someone else who said, "These are childish people who are tearing her down." I said, okay, here are the things that she said. Am I childish to think that we should consider someone's secret agenda when they are clearly not the person they present, and what their morality is before we allow them to interpret the data for us? I don't think that there is any doubt that Sasha is brilliant, scary brilliant, in an MK Ultra kind of way. And that is what I'm looking at, is what's the real agenda. She has deleted all of her comments from my post, which I'm sure her handlers have told her to, and she is no longer commenting on other posts. But I saved those and I will attach them as an addendum to the Substack on this. My advice on Lies Are Unbecoming is to use the research. This is a really useful thing for us, but don't confuse the messenger with the message. The message is written by authors, researchers who have put decades into what they produced. Unbecoming is using AI and writing a little algorithm to produce something like that. So don't give that credibility and your agreement to Unbecoming, who can't even get the name of the author right. Instead, go back to that researcher and find where that person is right in your estimation and where they're wrong. Don't give anyone that credit of authority. Argue with the ideas. And here is where I challenge Unbecoming on the feminization psyop, and here is where I expose Sasha for who she really is. Thank you for staying with me and thinking critically, which is more important when we're talking about those who are posing as our friends.